Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm here to talk to you about the importance of sound in the quest for freedom. Nature has a musical aspect to it, and we have been separated from it. We've become separated, and so the key to experiencing a state of freedom or reconnecting with nature lies in the world of music, of sound, rhythm, harmony, and timing. My name is Konrad Rogoz, and my presentation today is called The Sonic Divorce. And it calls for a reunion. It calls for a musical, sacred marriage. There's an intimate connection between music and authentic free living. It's freedom, justice, and all the principles of nature. All of them are objective, but they are subjective as well, in the sense that there's a profound personal connection to this world that is unique to each individual. And leading up to today, I've actually been really conflicted, wondering if I've done it all the right way and if I'll be understood in trying to convey what I'm trying to convey, since the message seems to really overlap with the messenger. And anyway, music is the bridge that connects those two worlds. So, as I make that claim, I thought, well, I should back it up by putting my own neck out there and playing my own music for you. And I wanted to start out with a song right away, but then I thought, either it's going to break the ice and I'll grab your attention early and that's all good, but also I could turn people off and be misinterpreted, you know? And that's a risk I'm willing to take. So here's a minute or two from my song, Hard Labor. Gotta pay the cost, no tick, wick. This hard labor and I'm kicked. Never fit in with the crowd or got into politic. You can tell I'm built different. Trust, it'll be a sequence of events if you touch. Even when the women do it, love. I've been eye to eye with great people, but you would be mistaken if you put another one above. Looking in the mirror, I don't recognize what happened. How I end up in the realm of the lost, so tragic. Yeah, we're all one in a sense, but where I come from ain't none like the rest. Ready for the moment, I can go out like a hero, in a blaze of glory or on a cross torch. I ain't come here fuck around, be on posters, far from the stars, I don't wanna get close. I'm not that good with talking about my feelings, but my thoughts I can make you feel it. I used to live in a vacuum, bring the bags I seal them, bring me all the packs I seal them. Hey, hermetically sealed off, death on hold, my EMF field off, airplane mode, I flow telepathic, another close call, it's a habit, feelings I can make you catch. When you see me at nighttime, I could be connected to my environment. Hard to separate what's worth living and dying in. Any order that's man-made, I'm defying. Hard labor, I came here to modify the system. Take them down if they ain't listening. Straight demolition, from young, everything resisting. Good times I don't really miss. Gotta pay the cost, no tick, wick. This hard labor and I'm kicked. Never fit in with the crowd or got into politics. You can tell. My only credentials that demonstrate my expertise in the topic, it's just my life experience and my love for music, both creating it and listening to it. And as you can see, my flavor of music is rap, which has just about as bad of a rap or connotation as the word anarchy, right? But what is rap actually? You know what I actually do? I rant, I chant, I do poetry to the tune of unrelenting drum rhythms mixed with all sorts of nocturnal melodies. And my subject matter is reality, but it's also romanticism. It's a truthful look at myself as well as analyzing the world around me, but also it's an emotion-filled testimony to the world that I want to live in, not just the world that I live in. And that's rap music to me. And to coincide with this presentation, I'm going to be releasing 5 songs exclusively to commemorate the FUNL conference. I'm not doing a presentation to promote my music, but I wanted to offer that to the conference because I'm very proud to be here. So you just heard one of those 5. It's going to be on my website, which is truthandlaw.com. And from there, I'm very easy to get in contact with. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the FUNL organizers. Thank you to everybody who's involved in making it happen. And thank you to all the presenters who I am proud and happy to share the stage with. And really, that's where the presentation begins, because without the speakers, there is no show. And this is the whole point. This is what the world feels like to me in 2025. The sonic divorce, man's estrangement from nature's music. Estrangement is a reduction or cutting off of communication between people who were formerly close. In this case, man and nature. This is what we are all here to heal. It's the division from nature, from her gifts, freedom, her law, natural law, and her music. To me, it's a relationship. It's give and take. It requires communication. And we have long now been living in a broken home. And more than what that looks or feels like, I'm going to attempt to bring attention to what it sounds like. And this is how it sounds like to me. It's a silent world where every venue and every instrument is here available for us to make concerts, but there's no artist to play the music. There's no one, and there's also no one filling the auditorium to hear it. And thus we've got the breakdown in communication. We have infinite information in the world, but we don't have the kind of communication that truly moves a person to make them want to take action and go into a single place to celebrate a shared idea and exchange information. And what results is a fracture, hence the title of my presentation, The Sonic Divorce. So the stage is set in the world for a transcendent, unforgettable experience, but the stage is dim. It's just like this. It's dim and hollow because it's missing the people. And I'll be presenting my claim that no other form of communication in the world is as connective as music. In other words, harmony, rhythm, and timing, they make up the main influential factor when it comes to what makes us relate to human beings and relating to our surroundings as well. It's music, and in fact, that's what connection is. Each relationship is a song, really, and that's one of the metaphors I'll expand on today. So, just the way I like my music, honest, upfront, and center, I'm going to do the same with my concepts or verses in what I'm doing today. These are the concepts that I'm going to hinge on in order to convince you of my thesis. Starting with the balance of perception in the world. Left brain, right brain. Do we see the world in a lunar, right-brained, sound-based way, or in a solar, left-brained, visual way? Next, I'll talk about the observation that music itself, it has an element of weight to it. It's corporeal, meaning it's connected to the body, to the physical world. There's a physicality to sound itself. You can feel it. Then in the middle will really be the heart of my argument, which is that timing and rhythm is the crucial element to manifesting results. Meaning that if we want love and we want freedom, we need to be tapped into a rhythm that helps us move smoothly and doesn't hold us back in a way that produces dissonance. Then I'll stress a much neglected but known fact that historically the musician was a key cultural profession, not just an entertainer in society, but a fixture in society, because the musician has the responsibility of being a teacher, a historian, a cultural interpreter. By cultural interpreter, I mean like an analyst who can make sense of current events. And then on top of all that, of course, musicians were the warriors for freedom, the actual warriors. And then finally, my conclusion is my call to action. Music inspires action, it inspires strong emotion, and that's our goal, the way I see it. This is why we're all here at the FUNL conference, to inspire care to action. But before I take you on that deep dive with me, I thought I'd break the ice. Not immigration, not ICE, but it's funny how symbolism, acronyms, green language, and all of that, all of those kinds of quirks in language, they seem to point us towards the truth about our governments and their systems of control, no matter how icy, ICE, or DOGE, or doji, or dodgy they are. I thought that was funny. Etymology can tell you about a lot of it, and this is where the subjective plays into it, because you could write a book about it and you can read it after 500 years. It may not have that much significance, but as you're breaking it down in real time, you'll be pointed towards connections. Now, one word that isn't on here with the etymology is the word music, the actual word music. Music comes from the Greek muses. And the word really does not go back any further than that. To me, that's an indication of something lost. It's interesting. But regardless of that, the Muses were the ancient Greek inspirational goddesses of literature, science, and the arts. And the number of them varies. 9 is the commonly accepted number. There were 9 Muses, with alternative research saying that there were only 3. I think there are 9, and I think the 9 Muses are actually the 8 notes of the octave. But the 8th note in an octave is also the first note of the second octave. So in an octave there are actually 7 notes. There are 7 different resonances, with the number 8 being a mirror image of the number 1. It's like an infinity sign. If you take a circle and replicate it, it is like taking a mirror image of one half of that infinity sign. So 8 is really a mirror image of the number 1, and the number 9 is really a mirror image of the digit 0. And something that those of you familiar with gematria should recognize, but those details are really outside of the scope of that presentation. But it's worth mentioning, as I'll be talking about that in the future, but more about the octave relationship and the number 7 will be in the next slide. Here, starting with sons and sens. Sound, the word sound comes from the Latin word sonus. That's where we get the word sonic. Sonic means relating to sound, resonance, dissonance, all these words that have to do with vibrations. And the core of it is literally son, S-O-N. The word son means offspring or source. It means source, like father, like son. Think of like concentric circles, and a son would be the outer circle of that inner circle, the father, the one that came before it. Now when you talk about what actually sound is, the etymology kind of gets circular. Like, what the word sound, where do we get it? Sound is sound. But what sound actually is, in describing it, not just its definition, it's the tangible effect of an event occurring. Think about like echolocation and a drop of water causing ripples in the sea. That's what sound is. It's the effects of an action taken. And S-E-N is now a different word, but it's really not different. Sound is one of the 5 senses. Sense comes from the Latin sentire, meaning to feel. This foreshadows the physical aspect of sound that I'll talk about. But when you talk about these S-E-N words, a consensus here, it's a dominant feeling. It's something that everybody feels. But sensory does not just mean feeling, it also means perception. When you S-E-N-S-E, sense something, you're perceiving an incoming signal. So S-E-N is referring to perception, while S-O-N is referring to the source or the origin of that signal. But the two of those, they go together and signify the law of cause and effect. This is the way the universe is fractal. So if we want our actions to reverberate, we have to receive and transmit the right kind of signal. And then it reverberates. So we go to reverberate with the root word verb, which means word literally, but it also means sound. And a verb is also an action word. A verb is an action word. It's action taken. And it's the same thing as we just talked about. Sounds are consequences of actions taken. And then if we pull on that string a little bit, it takes us to vowels and consonants, which is interesting, the way that vowels are formed by the vocal cords only. They're like openings of the mouth. And consonants are formed through friction and contact of the mouth. And there's that interplay of S-O-N and S-E-N again. It's cause and effect. It's the actual event or collision that created the noise, and then the interaction of the sound with the physical world. A vowel, a vocal or vowel is an action, or it's an act of will, and then you get the word volition, V-O-L. V-O-L also means to turn, interestingly, to turn like a wheel. Evolution, revolution. A revolution is a turning of the wheel. And there's a lot more to it. I don't want to spend too much time on the etymology because you can dig and find so much more. But speaking of the wheel, here it is, okay? It's time to get into the heart of the presentation, and it's also the dreaded moment when I pull out the wheel. Still, it's the point at which the conversation comes back to earth, but I laugh
because usually when I draw the wheel and start talking about the origins of the universe, I start to lose people. And I'll do my best to be concise here with the wheel. You know, I've investigated the mechanisms and workings of the universe as my personal passion and hobby for like 10, 15 years now. Intermittently, of course, you know. But essentially, as soon as I became a teenager, I've pursued this with a wonder and curiosity. And I've learned a lot. I keep learning a lot. One of the foundational axioms that I've learned, that I hold to, it's that time is both circular and linear. It's both. And space is actually the same. Things are actually separate from one another in space, yet it is all part of a living system. And there absolutely is quantum entanglement, there's synchronicity, there are all these connections. We are all separate, but we are all one. Both of these things are true. And in that world, somehow astrology works with the whole zodiac wheel. We live in a world where we have the zodiac wheel, and your name and your birthday and the time and place that you were born, it somehow all synchronizes with a general pattern that applies unfailingly. It just happens to apply. How can that be? And why does it work? More importantly, and what does it have to do with music? So, the fractal nature of the universe is due to it following the same law across all scales. All representations of the universe, they follow the same law. They're juxtaposed on top of each other. And the circle is the shape through which we currently make sense of it. And this is why it is such a all-encompassing symbol, omnipresent seemingly. Now, this circle, each individual quality or frequency of life, each soul to speak, or each essence, it has its own place on the outside of that wheel, its own angle. If you think about the 360 degrees in a circle, there's only 1 degree out of the 360 at which that angle aligns fully. Because this isn't just a circle, it's a rolling wheel. It's a rolling wheel of time. If you can see the actual mechanics playing out, this is the way it works. And as it rolls, it leaves a trail. And that trail is objective, and it is linear time. Linear time is irreversible. It's very real. That's not to say there could never be time travel. But once something is done, you cannot undo it. This is that kind of... Again, this coincides with the Hermetic principles. Once something happens, it's happened, and it is linear. But of course, along that line, since it's the same wheel rolling and rolling again and again, there's a pattern. Because the same degrees, the same angles will repeat. And this way we find the golden ratio and the Fibonacci spiral in nature. The spiral is a combination of circular and upward forward motion. And this is where we get the spiral in all these natural, anywhere in nature. And that's also where you get the shape of the bell from, and the cone, which amplifies sound. So each degree on this wheel has its own turn, so to speak, to manifest fully. And it has times that are worse or better, or almost impossible to manifest during. Action is never really impossible in the world. But the cycle of nature, or the turning of the wheel, it determines how easy or difficult it is. And that is why it seems like sometimes you can do no wrong, and it seems like sometimes you can't do something no matter how hard you try. And if you're still with me, this is like the beat of a song. Each note has a uniqueness in its placement. It can never really be repeated. It's played its part, but there's a similarity in its sound, one note to another, and there's this repetition in music. Now, what are these 4 wheels at the bottom? Those, I've taken them directly from the work of Robert Edward Grant. This is from his course, Language of Light. One of the things that course focuses on is this idea of counting on a wheel as opposed to the way we count, which is on a straight line. So we start with 0, and the wheel of the universe turns. And you can picture this making a full 360 degree turn, and that is 1 turn. Okay, that is the number 1. But those angles I talked about, those frequencies, it's the actual decimal value that actually determines the frequency. So if you like take a look at this like the year, like a zodiac wheel where you have the whole year on the calendar, it would be the same way if you're born like me, 2296, February 2nd, you're the same zodiac sign as somebody born February 2nd, 1999, even though it's 3 years later, but it's the same day. You may have noticed that this wheel has a heptagon inscribed within it, meaning it's split into 7. That's that shape on the inside. We talked about the number 7 on the last slide, and here it is now. This is the octave. And now, I know octave means 8, but it's actually 7 notes. And you see those notes here. These are the actual notes of the musical octave. We begin with C usually, C, D, E, F, G, back to A, then B, 7 letters. And then it goes back to C, and that is the beginning of the next octave. And the octave relationship has been called the basic miracle of music. And the miracle is in the ratios and the relationships between the notes and how they sound to us. So a given note, like the A note of a higher octave, is going to be exactly double the frequency of the octave below it. But yet it sounds the same to us. It makes the same sound in relation to the other notes. And this is really kind of a wonder, a mystery of science. It's been observed in adults, infants, and even other mammals. And again, mainstream science doesn't have a great explanation for that. Why that is the case? Well, music just confirms this idea of this universal wheel turning with each unique cycle. The same kind of stories will be told, but it is a unique sound each time because of the spiral nature of everything. It's like no two snowflakes are alike, but it will always be a familiar, and this is why the saying, there's nothing new under the sun. It's true. And here's something fun. Each movement from one note to the next on that heptagon, it's 1/7. And 1/7 is, the decimal is 0.1428. 0.14 should be familiar. It's because 3.14 is pi. But 1/7 is actually 51.4 degrees. It's another addition to the mystique of the number 51, which I've talked about often. But that's a song for another presentation. But when you take that 1/7 and you go up one octave, say 0.14, turn the wheel 1.14, 2.14, turn it again, you get 3.14, which is pi, or 22/7. 22/7 is the Archimedean pi. Now, why focus on the decimal and not the whole number? Well, when we think about sound, the sound of a note, it just means its relative position on the wheel. It's the decimal that matters. It's like 9 a.m., again, looking at it like a clock, 9 a.m. 2 weeks ago would be similar to 9 a.m. today, but it would be completely different from 2 a.m. on the same day. In mainstream mathematics, this would mean nothing. And I think that's one of the reasons the sonic divorce has taken place, because it's too easy to drift away from noticing and appreciating the connections and relations in the universe. So 3 turns plus 51 degrees, we get that transcendent number 3.14. Why is it relevant? It's especially relevant when it comes to the circle in mathematics, because it's the relationship of a circle's circumference to its diameter, right? And in my view, that's the relationship between space and time. 3 turns plus 1 note, it's like the 3 spatial dimensions plus time. This is the 3D, 4D world we live in. And here we are at the FUNL conference. There were 3 of them, and now here's the 4th. But let me reel it all in. What does this tell us about music and how it relates to our freedom and well-being? Well, everyone is a unique note or sound or frequency. In music, there's no such thing as a superior or inferior sound. There's no better or worse note to play. It's when to play that note and how to play it. It's all a combination lock. The universe is like a combination lock, and timing is the key to opening it. And the octave relationship is showing us that that's what it's all about. It's about ratios. It's about relationships. It's about harmony. connections. When I decided that I wanted to make music the topic of my presentation here about 2 months ago, it wasn't to share my findings related to fascination about number codes and patterns of the universe. It was just to share with you what I've learned is the key in life, and it's timing. And you can observe sometimes everything goes your way and you can do no wrong, but other times it's like no matter how much you desire something and how hard you drive for it, you get nowhere close. You could be working a dead-end job for 10 years with no prospect of change, but then you meet someone one day and they follow a hunch about you for any reason, and through that partnership your life could change just like that. And that's just a very brief surface level example, because there are actually so many of these types of stories. It's just another instance of timing. And again, life is a combination lock, and time and place is the key. And that comes to us in so many ways. Being in the zone, the flow state, confidence, muscle memory, charisma, that kind of magnetic personality, having an aura, having a presence. When you're prepared to the point of being an autopilot, just in the zone and simply just being present in the moment, what all of those truly are, it's all music. It's all being in connection with a certain rhythm, a certain cadence where you take a step and you don't have to think about being in the right place. You know you're there, and it just seems so light-footed and effortless. We don't always hear it with our ears, but there's always a soundtrack in nature. There's a soundtrack to every step and breath you take on this earth. And whether we know it or not, favorable outcomes come to us when our steps harmonize with that universal wheel, in other words, with nature's music. And before I say another word about it all, I want you to hear what I mean. I'm going to play the title sequence from a 1960 movie called Beat Girl. And I happened to find this one day, and really this is the thing that inspired me to do this presentation. This is when I said, that's it. This is it. So let's hear it. This is the sound of rebellion. To me, it's the sound of freedom. And maybe not to everyone, and it's not that we all should agree. There's no type that everyone finds attractive. There's no type of music that everyone likes. But for me, this is it. It has the X factor, that scene. The instruments, the dancing, the look in the eyes. It's like communication without a word. Yes, it's just a teenage party, right? It's hardly a natural law presentation. It's just a college teenage party, but it's a celebration of life in a way that makes it feel like a heroic mission. Because it is. It is heroic to truly enjoy yourself and express yourself. And see, it's not just the music, but that soundtrack provides the environment for such a timing where intense, free, and unapologetic enjoyment could take place. We've been divorced from this. The way I see it, everything that feels right is the things that feel right to people, especially young people, but everyone's fallen into this. The things we resonate with are the kind of things that build the prison around us. The most popular music, the popular movies, all of those things that feel fun, they're those things that actually are tightening the shackles and building the walls around us. And it's been constructed that way intentionally, of course. And this is why we need a sound. We need something like this. We need this underground sound that has this kind of vibe and aura that connects us. It needs to be a vocal and sonic presence that makes you want to be there. See, enjoyment is a huge part of freedom, in my view. In my personal view, we're not going to bring freedom and morality to the world until we make it fun. And, people used to say, feel the groove. A groove is like an indentation, right? A groove is like the grooves in a tire. And again, you have the wheel again. And then when it falls into place and hits that groove, that's when you just feel it. And people want to be around that kind of an energy that matches their own. It matches their groove, right? That's what it's all about. A shared groove, so that they can experience their journey through time together. Because, again, what is music? Sound, they're the effects of an action taken through time. It's very much intimately connected to time. So as we're kind of thrown onto this roller coaster of life, we want to find someone where we can be there at the same time together. And that comes from having the same groove or energy. And if you've made it this far, you've survived the wheel. Okay, the trial is over and we can have some fun with the presentation now and relax a little bit, right? No more talking about the wheel. What could be more fun than a wheel anyway? Of course, two wheels, namely the sun and moon. No, not really, but in essence, yes. I'm using solar and lunar really as symbols here to bring attention to the imbalanced way that we perceive reality. This is the left and right hemispheres of the brain. It's our innate polarity, and you'll see that polarity reflected through any lens that you choose to view the world through. You're going to see this polarity. We live in a left brain dominant solar world. We live in a solar world. It's not a patriarchy, but the reason the word patriarchy applies is because it's this solar world. It's just the way it is, which means we live in a light dominant world, increasingly so. It's continuing to increase. Generation by generation, the visual aspect seems to be more important. Everything is now about the look. Seeing is believing, right? And if seeing with our eyes isn't enough, then we can magnify our eyes to see really, really, really small. And we call it a microscope. We can, of course, discover technologies to see the things that we can't see, to increase our visual powers. It's all very solar, the way we do things. Conquering nature as opposed to interacting with it and being in a symbiotic relationship with it. Now, the sun, of course, gives us daylight. And this is when every morning we leave the bed and we spring into action, right? And we work. But what kind of work do people do? There are a million jobs or careers out there or studies that people can do in the daytime. And albeit I am generalizing a bit, I think you can essentially sum them all up by saying, what we do in the daylight, we do what needs to be done. It's necessity based. That's what we pay money for, right? We pay money for necessities and needs to be taken care of. And I say that to make the point that it is a materialistic way to live. It's very objective. It's very matter of fact. Now, contrast it with what happens when the sun goes down and the moon comes out. The pace of the entire world slows down. The emotions seem to awaken. We see less, but we feel more. How many times has that happened to you where you've told someone something at night and then you think about it the next day and you're like, man, I never ever would have said something like that. What got into me? There's something about that moonlight. And we absolutely do not do what needs to be done. Quite the opposite. It's all subjective at nighttime. We're so concerned about our personal wants, wishes, and more open-ended endeavors that are motivated not so much by a set goal, but by the pursuit of experiences and exploration, right? Dreams. Mainstream academic solar thinking doesn't even have a great explanation for why we even have dreams. Why do we have them? It's not a biological accident. When you fall asleep with your headphones in and you hear something that wakes you up, you were clearly aware when you were sleeping. You heard that and it woke you up. It's just a different realm you go into. It's very real, and it's of course neglected in the way we see this in a very solar way. But the nighttime, it's when creativity comes out, and that's when reason's rulership over the earth seems to give way just a little bit. And you can see that in the light of the moon. It's not as perfect and overbearing. It has the spots. The moon phases itself. It shows you that it is not as indestructible as the sun, so to speak. It's not as dominant. But there is a strength to the lunar aspect. It's just not the kind that is seen. It's the kind that is felt. And not only felt within us, but felt on the face of the earth. The earth feels it. The moon is linked with the tides of the seas getting higher. Now, gravity is kind of a different conversation, whether or not that controls the tides and how the moon controls the tides. But the observation remains that the moon seems to control the tides. I went to Florida last October, and it made quite the impression on me how much more dangerous the sea seemed to me at nighttime, where you couldn't really see anything. It was really something. It was really intense. I thought the waves became more intense at night. I found later that that was not actually the case. It was not the size of the waves that increased, but the sound of them. They actually get louder. The waves actually get louder at night. But it's not just because there's less surrounding noise, so you hear more of the water. It's not a relative louder volume. It has to do with temperature and sound waves refracting back towards the surface of the water because of the differences in temperature. And but here's where sound plays into it, because sound itself, it has qualities of weight and mass. There's a physicality to it, to music. Loud noise actually moves object. It breaks mirrors. Bass rattles the walls. Different frequencies of sound can actually make you feel sick. The police, these militarized police groups, they have these, they have these riot control systems like sonic nausea and LRAD, long-range acoustic devices, where they launch a sound cannon at you and make people just feel sick and feel terrible and nauseous. And there's a physicality that could be imposed through sound waves. When we hear a song or we hear anything, we say it's moving, right? When it's emotional. It's not just a figure of speech to say that it makes you feel emotion. There is actual movement there. It is actually moving. When we do say things move us. When something is meaningful, we say it's deep. This is another water word, right? The depths of something. And this is the overlap here between the moon, sound, and water. Feelings and emotions, they're all liquids. There are 3 states of consciousness that match the 3 states of matter. So thought is gas, emotion is liquid, and then action is solid. And sound, therefore, being liquid, it's the bridge between thought and action. Emotions are that middle ground. Again, guys, it's inspiring care to action. What inspires care to action more than a speech, a battle cry, or the cry of a child, right? It's just about the most universally inspiring thing, moving thing to people, right? Or a song, right? A song does that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should abandon or undercut the solar worldview. I'm not saying that emotions should rule the world and that objective thought should be second place in what motivates our actions. That would actually be good. Not that we have that anyway. We don't have objectivity being front and center. but we don't have true subjectivity either. And I'm just saying that the disappearance of inspiring music and sound, it coincides with why the world feels so detached. There's such a huge rift between what people say, what is written online, and then what is actually experienced in reality. And in my view, it is the divorce from sound that has done it. And a big part of that is just people simply can't detect a liar just by the way they sound. You know, being a charismatic speaker is one thing, but you can be charismatic and still sound insincere, which every politician does. The number one tool of evaluating the world should be actions. By their fruits you shall know them, right? Number one, actions. Appearances should be last. Looks should be the least concern. Now, ideas are the causal factors of behavior. We have no way to test, measure, or see what somebody's thinking, so we have to evaluate actions. Okay? But other than that, the second most important tool that we have through which we evaluate the world is what we call intuition. It is that important. It's second only to evaluating actions. Intuition is really a mix of emotion, feeling, but it's also a subtle physical detection. And that's what hearing is. It's an actual detection of movements. Hearing is the picking up of motions inside of a medium. That's literally what it is. And when we talk about light versus sound, this is another way that sound does something that light cannot. Light waves are transverse waves, which means they're transverse, and sound waves are longitudinal, in other words, standing waves. Light waves are horizontal, they're transverse, which means the light requires a direct line of sight. It's very straight. Sound is more wave-like, circular, and it dissipates. And that's why I put the double slit experiment here. The solar lunar worldview balance, it is the wave particle duality. It's both. And you can set up the experiment and test that and see it with your own eyes, like we did. It was a very solar thing to do. Or you can study the relationships between all things in the universe and find the underlying connections, like I'm doing in this presentation. And they saw when they did the experiment, it is both. It is a wave and it is a particle. In fact, it's the one that you're not expecting. Again, this is the interplay. The universe is a dynamic, living entity. And light and sound are not opposites. They're not. They're the same universal force, just a different form of it. And light slices its way through a medium, like air, like water. It cuts through it. But sound, it actually travels through the medium and deforms it. It changes its shape. It actually affects the shape of the medium and distorts it. It bends the actual air or water it travels through. Sound actually does that, and that's why sound cannot travel in a vacuum. It's actually impossible to hear in a vacuum. Think about that. Like, it's crazy. No matter how loud the sound is, if there is no medium, if there's no actual connection, no connecting thing connecting those two things, then no sound is heard. And when you think about things this way, that's natural law. It's this invisible thing, like oxygen, like water. There's a universal medium connecting everyone and everything. Every thought, every action, it reverberates. It's heard. And there is no vacuum in nature. Nature does not form a vacuum. There's no place to hide. And if you contemplate this, I hope you will see that music is so much more than just another quirk, some fun pastime. It's a testimony to truth itself. It's a manifesto of an irreplaceable, priceless, conscious being. And I think that's as much as I can say about sound without starting to get circular. And manifesto of my own that has to do with nighttime and the moonlight. It is my favorite song that I ever did to this day. It's really the only song out of the 100 that I made that I really, really like. And I'll play it because it relates here. And it is also bit of a love song, so why not? I record this. It's a pre-recorded presentation on Valentine's Day, so might as well. Let's go for it.
I see life different, authentic, so magnetic. I'm out for connection. The world seems fake, but life is just so damn alive. This is no depression. If I'm cryptic, it's for your own protection, no secrets. I can tell you about the hidden message. A master teacher, don't want you on your knee. How you gonna fly unless you wanna touch the heaven? Eye to eye, sightseeing, and I want your reflection. I want the wonder and amazement. All of it, I wanna be the cause of Renaissance phrase. Can I be an inspiration? Will you indulge my fantasy? The water's ours, let's take it. You know how long I waited. How do you think the universe was created? It had to be mutual adoration. But I know where the ego lives, just like the ghetto. I never really left it. I know damn well where anxiety and stress is. Teacher and a student, I still repeat the lessons. And the further that you are in your progression, the more hurts to go back where your first step is. The beauty
As we get to the end of this presentation, let's talk about the oral tradition. Oral tradition is very important, and guys, we cannot spell moral without oral. All right? So it's very important. This is for all my speakers and those awakening their voice who will speak in the future. I want to highlight the link between musician and modern day freedom fighter or natural law content creator. Guys, this is why there's so many of us. I'm talking to a bunch of musicians, the other presenters that are here, and likely the people listening as well. It's just the way it seems to be. And while this information, it is for everyone, specifically it's for the inner circle. And this is who needs to hear it, who I personally need to hear it the most. Like, we need each other's help in this movement. It's not just supposed to be another video, another drop in the ocean, or a tree that falls in the forest and no one hears it. I intend this presentation to be like the first domino to set a chain of events into motion. That is what I endeavor to do. And in order for that to happen, people need to remember their historical calling. We have a whole historical tradition and basis for what we do here as natural law content creators. There's a thousands of years old tradition of musician that involved much, much more than just singing and dancing. It involved preserving the cultural medium, maintaining the connection between people, their history, and their way of life. This is who we are, guys. It's really just a forgotten, really not royal, but truly elite lineage. Not by blood, but by craft. We are connected by our craft, what we choose to do. This natural community is cut from that cloth, right here, from this cloth. The Fili in Ireland, it is said that these are the descendants of the Druids. The Fili, about them, praise poetry, satire, and the legitimization of land ownership were only a few of the arrows in the quiver of the multi-talented Fili. They had to be a master of cuivna, that's how you say it in Gaelic. Cuivna, which involved historical knowledge, advanced memory skills, and the construction of genealogy. Even though they were typically employed by a single ruling family, they were one of the few people in society that had freedom of movement, which allowed them to travel freely between kingdoms. In other words, they kind of transcended the master-slave dynamic of the time because their craft made them nearly magical in what they could do, because their ability was not just in entertaining people or connecting to them, but it is deep in the amount of information they held and the way they communicated that information. And while you had an absolute monarch in those times, the Fili, just like with the Druids and these mystery traditions through time, their level of information and their ability to communicate it, their understanding of principles, it made them transcend even the slavery dynamic that we are in generation after generation. And this is the same for us. This is where freedom starts now. For me, is to embody that tradition and then share it with people so they can become more like us, and we can reach out to people, and then we transcend this master-slave dynamic together. Now, West Africa, totally different culture, totally different tradition, but you had the same thing, the griots. The griot is a West African troubadour historian. The griot profession is hereditary and has long been a part of West African culture. The griot's role has been traditionally to preserve the genealogies, historical narratives, and oral traditions of their people. Praise songs are also part of the griot's repertoire. The fact that they were historians, that they sing and dance, but they're also historians, and they have a historical memory of that culture, it fascinates me. The musician was always a poet and history keeper, which only makes sense if you think about it, because if you are to teach children, influencing the growth of impressionable minds with great potential, you should inspire them and teach them how they can choose to be who they want to be, but without limiting them, without limiting what is possible. And then at the same time, teach them where they come from also. Like, why are you here? Why are we here in the place that we are? What did your grandparents, what did your parents think and feel? Where do you come from? What happened 500 years ago that changed the way things are now? That's for children. It's very important to them. But then it's for adults too, for your contemporaries, both young and old. They need to know what is happening right now, to comment on current events, and then do that in an inspiring way that's going to resonate with people. The musician is needed, this true musician, okay, is needed on a daily basis. And then when they are needed, the musician sings the songs of rebellion. And that takes us to inspiring care to action. And I want to finish really my presentation with these two quotes from a book that I read while preparing for this. It's really my single main reference. It's a book that I read with this in mind, that I was going to talk about music and sound. And it's from a book called Noise by Jacques Attali. Music is prophecy. Its styles and economic organization are ahead of the rest of society because it explores much faster than the material reality can the entire range of possibilities in a given code. It makes audible the new world that will gradually become visible. In other words, it has often been thought that music and art is a reflection of life, right? Art imitates life, life imitates art. They are reflections of each other, the objective and subjective. But what Attali says here is that music is actually prophecy. Music is actually ahead of the times of what will happen. In other words, it inspires the changes, the mass movements, the societal actions to be taken, and the changes, the way that wheel is going to roll. Music foretells what is going to happen. I think that's a real profound thing to take home with us. And now, so not only music in these songs that I played, I think, in my view, the podcast is the new form of music. Like, spoken word has really replaced music, I think, in the modern day. And part of this is, of course, negative. There's a negative aspect to this, that music has become so repetitive that we resonate with people talking to us more so than even like singing and expressing themselves. But on the other hand, there's a positive aspect to that there's such a need to be spoken to directly, that 2 hours of just spoken word seemingly without rhyming, we put that on to go to sleep. We put that on as our soundtrack to do things throughout the day. The modern day podcast is the new form of music, and we should approach it that way. And we should speak that prophecy to others. I don't mean to invoke like woo-woo, prophetic, overly spiritual language, but we are talking about magic, inspiring action. It is all connected. It's the physical, it's the emotional, it's the mental, absolutely. It is the spiritual. He says musician, priest, and officiant were in fact a single function among ancient peoples. That's what we were just saying. Poet laureate of power, herald of freedom. The musician is at the same time within society, which protects, purchases, and finances him, and outside it when he threatens it with his visions. Really interesting the way that kind of sums it all up. He's paid by these monarchs, right, to entertain, to sing and dance, and to even sing songs of praise, right, like the national anthems and things like that. But there's this power of rebellion that is held within to inspire people to change. And there's a lot of power, there's a lot of responsibility here. And this is what it's all about. A musician is connected to society intimately. We're all connected to this society, yet we can never be loyal to a society that has forsaken itself. So when it's time to sing the songs of rebellion. And this is where we are now. And this is who we are. It's time for us now to sing songs of love and war. And thank you very much. And that was my song. And it was 7 slides. Those were 7 slides of the octave. Now, I said it was a song, so if it was the octave, in order for me to complete the octave, I would have to go back to the title slide. But that wouldn't work because we've already done it, right? It can't just be circular. So the only way this works now, you having heard this song, the only way that's going to work is if you play the first note of your next song. It's time for your title slide now. I don't want any more grand pianos in empty auditoriums. We already had a sonic divorce. We don't need any more divorces. And don't be another sonic divorce. Be there. Be present. That's where you're needed. And thank you very much for your time.